I'd like to start off by saying, yeah, your favorite caster is cool and all, but I just think Jat is just way better. This is the general point I think some people see when they hear a co-streamer make comments like, X team would do this better from Y region, right? Better than this LCS team. And what they're doing is just complete shit, and it's wrong because X team is also better. Here's an example of how to do it correctly, right? It's just like the whole famous thing, like I was alluding to, of they're having a appreciation thread of a caster or whatever, and then someone goes in there and says, well, I don't really think they're that great. I think this other caster is way better, actually. It's like, yeah, like that's your opinion. That's cool. But we weren't even talking about that, right? Like, why are you bringing in this other caster? We were talking about this caster, which we thought was really good. So I feel like, yes, this can be like a one-up showmanship type thing that a lot of fans think co-streamers are doing currently. And I can get the sentiment in this. But one thing that I can't understand is the idea that fans think that co-streamers don't care about the LCS, right? It's all about getting the short-term benefits rather than the continued longevity of the LCS, and to, in fact, dog on the LCS or kind of step on it or whatever, and kind of make a mockery of the product itself. Well, just ask Dom that. Just ask LS that. Hell, ask Doublelift that if they care about the LCS or not. They're all getting insane fucking viewership from this. It's so absurd to even postulate that someone like Dom would actually hates the LCS and wishes that it doesn't succeed when he's had some of the greatest growth in his stream that he's ever had, and it's all thanks to esports and the fact that he has talk shows surrounding the LCS or co-streams surrounding the LCS itself. I mean, you could just hear how pissed off he was about not being able to co-stream the LCS, and in fact, his viewership tanked dramatically just because of that factor, because he was, what they call live viewing, instead of co-streaming, to where you can't have the actual broadcast on your screen, right? So you have to have a timer or whatever the fuck. So I just think it's absolutely absurd that fans would even end up making that disingenuous argument, because that's clearly not the case, because otherwise then that fucks over the streamer themselves too, right? So why would they want that at all? That just doesn't make any logical sense. So now let's go on to the more, I think, reasonable point, which is that co-streamers are becoming more cynical or negative. And I think for the most part, yeah, that is true. They are far more cynical or negative, especially compared to something like the Riot Broadcast, for instance. And we're just talking about LCS here, right? Now, let's think about why someone would be inherently negative. Now, I want to take you guys back to some like human evolutionary biology type shit. Seems like I'm doing that shit more and more. But it's that humans are naturally drawn to focus on the negatives, right? Remember Doublelift's video back, I want to say it was 2 years ago, talking about loss aversion. And I think this was his video about the reason as to why League of Legends is constantly changing, and maybe that's a bad thing or something. And he talks about loss aversion and how just people in general, humans in general, don't want to lose something. And they have more sensitivity in losing something than they do in gaining something brings them joy, right? And that's a real thing. That's a real psychological phenomenon. And mainly it's because it's just an evolutionary reaction, right? Because you'd rather be more sensitive to the negatives of something so that you don't die from it, right? It's like, yeah, you have to look out for danger more often, because that can kill you. It can literally kill you, right? Another instance of this is your your taste buds and the evolution of bitterness. Bitterness in humans was invented, or evolutionarily invented, so that you don't eat anything poisonous, because generally things that are poisonous are going to taste bitter to you. And so you avoid things that taste bitter. That's why a lot of children don't like bitter things. And you have to get accustomed to the taste of bitterness. And, you might even grow to like it. So, with that said, I think the reason why there is a lot more negativity from these co-streamers is because it's easier for a high-level analyst to notice mistakes. Like LS or someone like Dom, they've just had experience at the higher level of play, right? Like, obviously Dom was a pro player, LS was a coach. He still frequently hits into masters or grandmasters or whatever. So they're obviously more sensitive to things in which pro players may do bad. And like, this isn't fucking pee-wee baseball, right? Like, this isn't a coach or someone shouting out from the sidelines because a fucking 5-year-old can't hit a standing ball, that's not even thrown by a pitcher. It's like, that isn't the case here. Although maybe it fucking is when you think of the LCS. But they're expecting a certain level of play from these pro players, and it's because they're professional players, right? And so you have to keep this in mind. And then on top of that, you also have to keep the broader context in mind of strength compared to other teams and other regions, because guess what? They're going to be competing against them. That's the whole fucking point of the League of Legends circuit, in fact, is that your regional league ends up over into MSI, which is, this great big international tournament with everyone there, and then you kind of get a break, and then it's like the whole fucking big block party and shit with Worlds, right? Like, that's one of the greatest, in fact, that's one of the greatest tournaments in all of esports. This is like the grandiose thing. And so you can't but help compare these teams regionally to other regions. That's just how the League of Legends circuit was built fundamentally anyways. Now, so it's not absurd to think that these co-streamers would then compare multiple times of LCS teams over, into LPL or LCK or LEC teams. That's just very natural because they know that the international tournament is coming up. And I do get it. I think this is one of the things in which irks a lot of fans is hyperbole or exaggeration, because it's certainly a thing. And I think it just inherently bugs fans, yet they never seem to state this, in fact, or be aware that it's going on. But I think it's somewhat unconsciously that they know that someone is being hyperbolic. And I fucking hate when people don't think so. In fact, they're probably just fucking like Pangea wandering Neanderthals if they don't think that. Now I'm just fucking with you guys. I was using hyperbole itself, and the whole point is that hyperbole is more prevalent than ever when you just think about it in the broader context of things. I like to get a wide view of the forest, so to speak, and it's because of increased connectivity between humans just through advanced instant communication, right? Like the internet. And now you're at a point to where you're competing with everybody else. And that might not seem like that great of a thing when you're just thinking of the random pleb going on Twitter and saying whatever the fuck to 4 followers or whatever. But now when you're thinking of in a content creator's aspect, it's like, well, now they're fighting against all other content creators. So it's like, you better come up with something good or something fucking just outlandish to people, where people are just like, yo, what the fuck? And it's just the same thing with any of my shit, although I don't say anything too outlandish. Well, nah, I guess I do. But it's that you're competing with everybody else. So at the end of the day, you have to realize that, and to attune your brand as such, so that you can then get more eyeballs on it, or more people to consume it or whatnot. That's just the way that marketing is, in fact, and I don't think we're ever going to get away from that. And in fact, it's probably spiraling into something ridiculous, because we've never had this much connectivity in the existence of the human race, right? So there's certainly an element to that, but I'm not saying that Costreamers are just saying the things that they're saying for the sake of being bold or outlandish or whatnot, but that's certainly a factor. Now, I think what is actually happening is that LCS Costreamers are creating a vastly different product than the LCS, which, focuses on the negatives, where historically the LCS has focused on the positives of a team or a player or narratives and such. And so they're just giving a different product and marketing towards a market that has been underfed necessarily. And so that's all that they're trying to do. And maybe now that conversation, in fact, has spread over to where now there are more louder voices within the negative aspects, and yet there's maybe the same amount of positive people that were over here in this segment, right? And so now you have two competing voices, and maybe some people jumped over from the positive to the negative side because they like that side better. And as I said before, the whole hyperbole and finding that entertaining and whatnot is part of that aspect too, of maybe why people gravitate towards that negative aspect. And also, just the negative human inclination and whatnot that I was talking about before with evolution. And so, but with that said, you also have the Riot Broadcast also trying to get a little bit more negative, right? Like things like Freaks, like reinvigorated style of casting. It's clearly become more negative, and I think it's pretty fucking cool. I think it's pretty good. Or Mark Z, for instance, he's always been more of the negative aspect when it comes to the analyst desks, but he also balances that out amongst his peers, right? Because his peers are often more positive. But historically, you've had a pretty positive Riot Broadcast. Now, one thing I like to compare this to is someone like Richard Lewis. He's known as like this esports industry cynic, right? Fucking Overwatch, League of Legends, fighting gaming community. Like he's a cynical guy, but I think it's because he realizes, and I'm pretty sure he's actually said this, is because that he sees that a lot of people aren't pointing out all the shit that's wrong with it, and everyone's just acting like everything's all fine and dandy, and that the industry is going in like this great direction, and there's all profitability and everything's just going great for all these esports teams. It's like, no, he sees a clearly different story, and he's going to share that, and it's because no one else is talking about it. So I think that's the kind of effect that you're having with these co-streams, is that no one was talking about it before. And now suddenly you have this vast swath of people that are going to them and seeing that they have something to say, and it kind of makes a whole lot of sense. Now, let's get into the whole aspect of, well, first, you don't have to watch any of these co-streamers. In fact, you do have the freedom of will, or at least I hope you have the freedom of will, to where you don't need to watch people like LS. You don't need to watch people like Dom. In fact, if you don't want to watch them, I don't think they would have any problem of you not watching them. Right? And like, I do get it. If you don't like a personality like LS, like personally, I think LS is like he's like a theoretical physicist, Like that, I think that's probably the closest similar job description I would give him. And that, yeah, you can come up with some brilliant shit, which sometimes can be applied IRL and in theory should work, but without substantial proofs, it certainly has the possibility of falling flat. Like that's how I look at his analysis. But the whole point being, too, is that you also need theoretical physicists in order to have physicists as well, too, because theoretical physicists are the ones that lay the groundwork for then the actual physicists to then go in and do their work and try and create the proofs for the theoreticals, right? So it just goes hand in hand with that. And I could get why some people don't like that. And I think really the real problem that fans have is similar to when someone goes to a friend looking for praise because, you know, you're trying to give them good news. You're just like, yo, I just got this raise, or, you know, I just got this dope job interview, like, or like, yo, I got a new car, like, check out my sick Porsche. And then the friend ends up going, yeah, like, yeah, that's pretty cool, but like not as cool as my Ferrari, like 430 Scuderia or some shit. Like, what? By the way, that car is actually super sick. One of the sickest cars I've ever driven. But see, and like, and that's the point, is that I think some of these fans end up going into a co-stream and, you know, wanting to hear praise or something of like their team, like Cloud9 or Team Liquid or whatever. And all they hear is a co-streamer or an analyst say, didn't really like that play. Thought they could have done it better. So overall, I don't think this whole co-stream fiasco, or rather this insurgence, kills the LCS, drives people away, or anything like that. And in fact, I think a large part of why people feel there's an imbalance in the force, so to speak, is because there really is lacking supplementary content from Riot too. Like, where's the Drive series? Where's duos? Like, we barely got anything out of the Perks and Jensen storyline and rivalry, or, you know, a cool video about Fudge improving and, you know, getting shit on and whatever from the community. Like, that would have been sick. And it's like, yes, I know that Corona exists and, you know, that has hampered production and whatnot, and to portray narratives or to kind of unravel them and whatnot. But the LCS is still going to suffer from it regardless. They're still going to suffer from a lack of narratives. And I just don't think people realize just how big Riot is, or, you know, has sway in their ability to drive narratives. So that's created like this big tipping imbalance, and now you have all these co-streamers coming in doing what they know is lacking within the entire community, and that's obviously making, you know, the negative voices even louder and the criticisms even louder. But at the end of the day, I just think that if you don't like any of these co-streamers, just don't watch them. And to then think that, oh, well, now all their fans or whatever are going to join into the conversation, and it's going to pollute the conversation on Reddit or on Twitter or whatever. It's like, well, you also have to realize that maybe that conversation was just never there to begin with, and this can be a good thing. This can be a good thing to be exposed to the other side of things, of just maybe a team didn't play this certainly that well or whatnot. So I just think it's better to at least have an open discussion about exactly the positives and the negatives of whatever surrounding the LCS. And I really do think that co-streamings actually allow that.